Welcome to NBA Season Recaps, where we dive deep into the most fascinating chapters of basketball history. If you enjoy falling asleep to the gentle rhythm of basketball history, consider subscribing to NBA Season Recaps and hitting that notification bell. We upload new sleep-friendly basketball stories every week, designed specifically to help you drift off while learning about the game's most incredible moments. Tonight, we're going back to 2010 and 2011, to a season shaped by betrayal and redemption, by a young point guard's meteoric rise, and a German legend's long-awaited coronation. From LeBron James's decision to Dirk Nowitzki's championship tears, from the Memphis Grizzlies' impossible upset to the Cleveland Cavaliers' historic collapse, this season had it all. Get comfortable, close your eyes, and let me take you on a journey through the season that proved basketball's most beautiful stories are the ones nobody sees coming. Chapter 1, The Decision. The 2010 offseason was unlike anything the NBA had ever experienced. The free agent class was absurdly loaded, headlined by LeBron James, Dwyane Wade, Chris Bosh, Dirk Nowitzki, Carlos Boozer, and Amare Stoudemire. All-stars, franchise cornerstones, future Hall of Famers, all available at the same time. Never before in NBA history had so much elite talent been available simultaneously. The salary cap landscape had aligned perfectly, creating a once-in-a-generation opportunity for teams to completely reshape their rosters. But the entire basketball world was fixated on one man, LeBron James. The 25-year-old had spent 7 seasons with the Cleveland Cavaliers, dragging them to 2 consecutive 60-win seasons and a finals appearance in 2007. He had averaged 29.7 points, 7.3 rebounds, and 8.6 assists that season. Cleveland had built everything around him. The city had given him everything it had. They had traded for Shaquille O'Neal. They had acquired Anton Jamison at the trade deadline. They had surrounded him with role players perfectly suited to his game. And on the evening of July 8th, 2010, LeBron sat down in a Boys and Girls Club in Greenwich, Connecticut, looked into ESPN's cameras, and uttered the words that would define this season. "I'm going to take my talents to South Beach." The reaction was immediate and volcanic. ESPN's Jim Gray, who conducted the interview, later admitted he had no idea the backlash would be so severe. The decision special raised $2.5 million for charity, but that fact was completely overshadowed by the manner of LeBron's announcement. In Cleveland, fans poured into the streets, burning LeBron jerseys. The letter was raw, emotional, and deeply personal. Gilbert promised to deliver a championship to Cleveland before the self-titled former king wins one. He guaranteed it. But LeBron wasn't just leaving. He was joining Dwyane Wade and Chris Bosh in Miami to form a superteam, the likes of which the modern NBA had never seen. 3 top 15 players, all in their primes, choosing to play together. The coordination had been planned for months. Wade, Bosh, and LeBron had discussed the possibility during the 2008 Olympics in Beijing. They had structured their previous contracts to expire in the same summer. This wasn't spontaneous. This was orchestrated. The Heat held a welcome rally at American Airlines Arena on July 9th, less than 24 hours after the decision. 17,000 fans packed the arena for what felt like a championship celebration, despite the fact that the team hadn't played a single game together. LeBron, Wade, and Bosh stood on stage, and the atmosphere was electric. When LeBron grabbed the microphone, the crowd was deafening. He made another promise that would haunt him for the next year. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7. Championships. He held up fingers as he counted, his voice rising with each number. The crowd went absolutely berserk. The backlash was enormous. LeBron went from being the most popular player in basketball to the most hated practically overnight. Fans across the league despised the superteam concept. Michael Jordan publicly questioned LeBron's approach, saying he would never have called Magic Johnson and Larry Bird to team up against everyone else. Charles Barkley called it the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Former players questioned his competitive drive. Sports Illustrated ran a cover story titled "The Disrespect." And the narrative was set. The 2010-2011 season would be defined by whether LeBron's gamble would pay off. Chapter 2, the off-season earthquake. LeBron wasn't the only domino to fall. The 2010 free agency period reshuffled the entire league. It was one of the deepest and most consequential free agent classes in league history, and the ripple effects shaped every corner of the NBA. Dwyane Wade re-signed with Miami, of course. He had been the one recruiting LeBron and Bosh all along. Wade was the incumbent star, the 2006 Finals MVP, the player who had put Miami on the championship map. Chris Bosh left the Toronto Raptors via sign and trade to complete the trio. Bosh was a versatile big man who could stretch the floor, defend multiple positions, and score from anywhere. The Heat's Big Three was born, and the expectations were immediate: championship or bust. In Chicago, the Bulls made two transformative moves that would completely change their trajectory. They signed Carlos Boozer from Utah in a sign-and-trade deal, giving them a legitimate scoring power forward who could work in the post and hit the mid-range jumper. But the more important move, the one that truly changed the franchise's direction, was hiring Tom Thibodeau as their new head coach, replacing Vinny Del Negro. Thibodeau had been the architect of the Boston Celtics' elite defense as an assistant coach under Doc Rivers. He was intense, demanding, and obsessive about defensive principles. His practices were grueling, his film sessions were exhaustive, and his expectations were relentless. He was about to turn the Bulls from a mediocre defensive team into the best defensive unit in basketball. Amare Stoudemire headed to the New York Knicks in a sign-and-trade from Phoenix, giving the moribund franchise its first real star in years. Stoudemire arrived in New York with something to prove. He had been overshadowed by Steve Nash in Phoenix, and injuries had raised questions about his long-term durability. But Stoudemire silenced the doubters immediately. He was a force from opening night, giving Knicks fans a reason to believe again after years of mediocrity. His dominance at Madison Square Garden was reminiscent of the great Knicks big men of the past. He would string together 9 consecutive 30-point games to set a Knicks franchise record, surpassing Willie Knowles' record of 7 straight that had stood since 1962. The Cleveland Cavaliers, devastated by LeBron's departure, fired head coach Mike Brown and hired Byron Scott to try to rebuild. Scott was a former NBA champion as a player with the Showtime Lakers, and he had experience coaching young teams in New Jersey and New Orleans. But no coach could have prepared for what was coming. Cleveland had built its entire roster, its entire identity, around LeBron James. Without him, they were about to discover just how dependent they had been. The coaching carousel extended across the league. The Philadelphia 76ers brought in Doug Collins, a veteran coach who had last roamed the sidelines with the Washington Wizards. The New Orleans Hornets hired Monty Williams from Portland's coaching staff, a young coach who would eventually become one of the most respected in the game. The New Jersey Nets hired Avery Johnson, the former Dallas Mavericks coach, and moved into the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey, while their permanent home, the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, was being constructed. The Atlanta Hawks promoted assistant Larry Drew to replace Mike Woodson. The Los Angeles Clippers hired Vinny Del Negro, fresh off being fired in Chicago, and the Golden State Warriors promoted Keith Smart to head coach after Don Nelson. The all-time wins leader among coaches resigned following a contract buyout. The Boston Celtics, looking to make one more championship run with their aging core of Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Ray Allen, added Shaquille O'Neal in free agency. Shaq was 38 years old and clearly past his prime, but the Celtics were hoping his presence, his experience, and his championship pedigree could push them over the top. Pierce and Allen both re-signed. It would be Shaq's 19th and final NBA season, a farewell tour for one of the most dominant players the game had ever seen. In Memphis, the Grizzlies quietly built a team that nobody was paying attention to. They had Mark Gasol, the younger brother of Pau, developing into one of the best passing centers in the league. They had Zach Randolph, a bruising power forward who had reinvented himself as a reliable star after years of controversy. They had Mike Conley, a steady point guard who didn't make mistakes. And they had Tony Allen, an undrafted wing who had become one of the best perimeter defenders in basketball. Memphis wouldn't make a single headline in the offseason. They would make plenty in April. And then there was Dirk Nowitzki. Despite receiving interest from other teams, the German superstar quietly re-signed with the Dallas Mavericks. He had been with Dallas since 1998. He was 32 years old, and the narrative around him was cemented in the minds of every basketball fan. Dirk Nowitzki was a tremendously talented player who would never win the big one. He'd been upset as the #1 seed in the first round by the Golden State Warriors in 2007, one of the most embarrassing defeats in playoff history. He'd watched the 2006 finals slip away after being up 2-0 against the Miami Heat. Every year, the same questions followed him. Can Dirk win a championship? Is he too soft? Is the one-legged fadeaway enough when the pressure is at its highest? Rick Carlisle, Dallas's head coach, surrounded Dirk with a roster of savvy veterans. Jason Kidd, 37, was no longer the explosive athlete he had been with the Nets, but his basketball IQ was unmatched. Sean Marion, 32, was still one of the most versatile defenders in the league. Jason Terry, 33, was one of the most dangerous bench scorers in basketball. Tyson Chandler provided rim protection and rebounding. Peja Stojakovic, another European sharpshooter, added shooting depth. JJ Barea, a 5'10" guard from Puerto Rico, gave Dallas speed and energy off the bench. Nobody in the media picked Dallas to win the championship. Nobody even picked them to reach the finals. They were old, they were slow, and they had Dirk, the guy who always came up short when it mattered most. Nobody knew it yet, but this quiet re-signing, this unremarkable roster assembly, would lead to one of the greatest championship runs in NBA history. The 2010-2011 season tipped off on October 26th, and the spotlight was squarely on Miami. The Heat opened against the Boston Celtics on TNT, and the entire basketball world tuned in to see if the superteam was real. It was the most anticipated opening night in years. The game was treated like a playoff contest, and the intensity matched. Chapter 3, the early season. The early results were mixed, to put it kindly. Miami lost 5 of their first 8 games, including their season opener to the Boston Celtics, 88-80. The chemistry wasn't there, and it was obvious to everyone watching. Lebron James looked uncomfortable sharing the ball with 2 other stars. After years of being the sole engine in Cleveland, he deferred too much. He stood in the corner when he should have been attacking. His shot attempts dropped from over 20 per game in Cleveland to just 16 in the early. Going with Miami, Dwyane Wade, accustomed to being the alpha dog since Shaquille O'Neal's departure, had to adjust to LeBron's presence. And neither player seemed quite sure who should take over in crunch time. Chris Bosh, meanwhile, was trying to figure out how to be effective as the third option after years of being the go-to scorer in Toronto. The role confusion was evident in their offensive sets. Miami would call a play for LeBron. Then Wade would take over mid-possession, or Wade would start a pick and roll, only to have LeBron cut through and disrupt the spacing. The ball movement that had made each player great individually was stagnant and hesitant when they played together. Erik Spoelstra, Miami's young head coach, was under enormous pressure. Spoelstra was a Riley protege, a former video coordinator who had worked his way up through the Heat organization. He was smart and detail-oriented, but he was coaching three superstars who were still figuring out how to play together. There were persistent rumors that LeBron and Wade wanted Spoelstra fired, that they didn't respect him, that they wanted Pat Riley himself to return to the bench. Riley, the Heat's president, squashed those rumors firmly and publicly, backing his coach. It was a crucial moment. Had Riley wavered, the entire season might have unraveled. The most anticipated game of the early season came on December 2nd, when LeBron returned to Cleveland for the first time since the decision. The atmosphere was hostile beyond anything he had ever experienced, and this was a man who had played road games in every arena in America. Security was heightened. Extra police were stationed throughout the arena. The pre-game warm-ups were interrupted by chants that can't be repeated on family television. Every touch of the ball was met with thunderous boos that registered on seismic equipment. Fans held signs calling him a traitor, a coward, a quitter. Some fans wore t-shirts reading "Quitness" with LeBron's face. Others held up enlarged copies of Dan Gilbert's letter. One fan held a sign reading, "Once a king, always a quitter." Cleveland had waited 5 months for this moment, and they let LeBron have everything they had stored up. LeBron scored just 24 points on 8 of 21 shooting. He looked rattled, pressing, forcing shots he normally wouldn't take. The Cavaliers, playing with house money and pure emotion, won that game 118-90, a 28-point blowout. Mo Williams, LeBron's former running mate, scored 28 points and played the game of his life. When the final buzzer sounded, the Cleveland crowd erupted as if they had just won the championship. Fans rushed toward the court. Confetti fell from the ceiling. It was one of the most emotional regular season games in NBA history. A night where basketball was secondary to the raw human drama of betrayal and abandonment. LeBron left the court quickly, his head down, the weight of an entire city's anger following him down the tunnel. But over time, the Heat figured it out. The turning point came in December, when everything started clicking. Erik Spoelstra made a crucial adjustment, moving Chris Bosh to center in small ball lineups and giving the Heat the spacing they desperately needed. LeBron could finally operate from the post with room to work. Wade could slash to the basket without running into a crowded paint. The transformation was immediate and dramatic. Miami went on an extraordinary tear, setting a league record with 10 consecutive road wins in a single calendar month and a franchise record 15 wins in December. They won games in Portland, Denver, Utah, and Los Angeles, proving they could win in hostile environments. LeBron, Wade, and Bosh started finding their rhythm. Their individual talents began to complement rather than compete with each other. The defense tightened as players learned their rotations and responsibilities. They held opponents to just 92 points per game during their December run. The offense became more fluid as all three stars discovered how to create for each other rather than simply taking turns. Wade's slashing opened up three-point opportunities for LeBron. LeBron's passing created easy baskets for Bosh in the post. Bosh's shooting stretched defenses and created driving lanes for Wade. The Heat also benefited from their supporting cast. Mario Chalmers held down the point guard spot with toughness and the occasional big shot. Udonis Haslem brought toughness and rebounding. Mike Miller was a dead-eye three-point shooter when healthy. Joel Anthony provided rim protection in limited minutes. It wasn't the deepest roster in the league, but the top-end talent was overwhelming. Miami finished the regular season 58-24, the second best record in the Eastern Conference, behind only the Chicago Bulls. They went 28-13 on the road, one of the best road records in the league, proof that they could win in hostile environments. On Christmas Day, in one of the marquee games of the season, LeBron recorded a triple-double as the Heat demolished the Lakers 96-80 in Los Angeles. It was the first Christmas Day triple-double in 40 years, and only the fourth in NBA history. LeBron joined Oscar Robertson, John Havlicek, and Billy Cunningham as the only players to achieve that feat on December 25th. Meanwhile, across the league, the early season was producing remarkable stories that went far beyond Miami. On October 28th, John Wall, the #1 pick in the 2010 draft, made his NBA debut as the Washington Wizards visited the Orlando Magic's brand new Amway Center on TNT. Wall was electric, the kind of lightning-fast point guard who made fans gasp when he changed directions. The Wizards would struggle to a 23-59 record, but Wall showed flashes of a generational talent. On October 29th, Jeremy Lin became the first Taiwanese American to play in the NBA when he debuted for the Golden State Warriors in a win over the Los Angeles Clippers. Lin was an undrafted player out of Harvard, a long shot who had fought for every opportunity. His debut was a footnote, barely mentioned in the box score. Nobody noticed at the time, but Jeremy Lin's story was far from over. The following season, he would take the entire basketball world by storm. On November 12th, Kevin Love of the Minnesota Timberwolves did something that hadn't been done in nearly 3 decades. He grabbed 31 rebounds and scored 31 points against the New York Knicks. The last player to record a 30-30 game was Moses Malone, all the way back on February 11th, 1982. Love was just 22 years old, playing for one of the worst teams in the league, and already rewriting the record books. It was a reminder of kids' longevity and brilliance, and another quiet milestone for a Dallas team that was stacking up veteran accomplishments. Pierce joined Shaquille O'Neal, Kevin Garnett, and Ray Allen in that exclusive club. It was a testament to the Celtics' veteran-laden roster, and a reminder of how much accomplished talent was gathered in Boston for one final championship push. Tim Duncan became the Spurs' all-time leading scorer on November 19th, passing David Robinson's total of 20,790 points. Duncan also surpassed Robinson in games played that same night, reaching 988. At 34, the big fundamental was still quietly excellent, anchoring a Spurs team that would win 61 games. Bryant was 32 years old and still one of the most dangerous scorers in the world, capable of erupting for 40 or 50 points on any given night. Chapter 4. Milestones and Records. The season also set a record for international participation, with 84 international players on opening night rosters, the most in NBA history. Players from 38 different countries were represented, a testament to how global the game had become. The NBA was no longer an American sport. It was a world sport, and the 2010-2011 season was proof. On November 9th, the Indiana Pacers scored 54 points in the third quarter against the Denver Nuggets. Nearly perfect shooting in a single period that left everyone in the building stunned. It was one of the highest scoring quarters in NBA history, and a reminder that on any given night, in any given quarter, the NBA can produce something nobody has ever seen before. On November 30th, Ben Wallace of the Detroit Pistons grabbed his 10,000th career rebound, becoming one of the few undrafted players in NBA history to reach that milestone. On December 10th, George Karl of the Denver Nuggets earned his 1,000th career coaching victory, becoming just the 8th coach in NBA history to reach that mark. Karl had been coaching in the league since 1984, guiding teams in Cleveland, Golden State, Seattle, Milwaukee, and Denver. It was a testament to longevity and adaptability in a profession where job security is a myth. 2 days later, on December 12th, Tim Duncan of the San Antonio Spurs played in his 1,000th career game. Duncan had spent his entire career with one franchise, a rarity in the modern NBA. 1,000 games, all in a Spurs uniform, all with the same quiet excellence that defined everything he did. On January 7th, 2011, the Boston Celtics became only the second franchise in NBA history to reach 3,000 all-time victories, joining the Los Angeles Lakers. It was a milestone that spoke to the Celtics' extraordinary history. From Bill Russell's dynasty through Larry Bird's era to the current Pierce Garnett, Alan Core, Phil Jackson, coaching the Lakers in what would be his final season, earned his 1100th coaching victory on October 29th. The Zen Master was stacking wins at a pace that few coaches in any sport could match. Nobody knew it yet, but the end was coming faster than anyone expected. No story from this season is quite as dramatic or as heartbreaking as the Cleveland Cavaliers' fall from grace. It was a collapse so complete, so devastating, that it rewrote the record books and served as the ultimate testament to the impact of a single player. Chapter 5, Cleveland's Collapse. Just 1 year earlier, the Cavaliers had posted the best record in the NBA for the second consecutive season. They had been 61-21. They had been the favorites to win the championship. They had home court advantage throughout the playoffs. They had the MVP candidate in LeBron James, averaging 29.7 points, 7.3 rebounds, and 8.6 assists. They had been built to win now, with LeBron James as the engine that made everything run. And then LeBron left, and the engine disappeared, and the car crashed. Byron Scott's team was young, talent depleted, and completely lost. The roster construction was exposed as a house of cards. They had no true point guard after Mo Williams struggled with injuries and ineffectiveness. They had no consistent outside shooting. They had no secondary playmaker. Every offensive possession became a struggle against increasingly aggressive defenses that no longer had to worry about LeBron's otherworldly ability to create shots for himself and others. Mo Williams, who had been an all-star playing alongside LeBron, struggled mightily as the primary creator. His assists dropped from over 5 per game to just 3.5. His shooting percentage plummeted as he faced double teams and defensive attention he had never seen before. Anderson Varejão was a solid role player, but not a franchise cornerstone. The Brazilian center was energetic and hustling, but he couldn't carry an offense. Anton Jamison, who had been acquired at the trade deadline the previous season, specifically to help LeBron win a championship, was 34 and declining. His legs were gone. His shot was inconsistent. He looked like a player whose best days were far behind him. The losses started piling up early. Cleveland was bad from the first tip-off, losing their opener to the Boston Celtics by 19 points. But the true nightmare began in December. They lost game after game after game, and the losses kept mounting with no end in sight. The team's confidence evaporated. Players began pressing, forcing shots, making mental mistakes they never would have made the year before. Young players like J.J. Hickson and Christian Iyengar, who had shown promise playing limited minutes with LeBron, crumbled under the pressure of expanded roles. By late January, Cleveland had lost 20 consecutive games in the same season, breaking their own franchise record of 19 straight set during the abysmal 1981-82 season. The streak had started on December 20th with a loss to the Miami Heat, LeBron's new team, adding insult to injury. But the streak didn't stop there. It kept going, and each loss was more soul-crushing than the last. 21 odd 22-23. Many of these weren't blowouts. The Cavaliers would stay competitive for 3 quarters, building small leads, playing inspired basketball, only to fall apart in the 4th when they needed someone to make a big play, and there was no one capable of doing it. They lost 5 games by 5 points or fewer during the streak. They lost multiple games in overtime, unable to execute in the clutch moments where LeBron had once carried them. On February 5th, a 111-105 loss to the Portland Trail Blazers gave Cleveland 24 straight defeats, setting the all-time NBA record for the longest single-season losing streak. The game was played at Quicken Loans Arena, where just 1 year earlier the Cavaliers had celebrated 61 wins and home court advantage throughout the playoffs. Now, the building was half empty, filled with frustrated fans who booed their own team. The previous record had been shared by the 2003-2004 Denver Nuggets and the 1995-96 Vancouver Grizzlies. Cleveland had officially surpassed the worst losing stretches in league history. The weight of the streak was crushing the organization. Byron Scott looked haggard on the sidelines. Players were making basic mistakes, missing free throws, turning the ball over in crucial moments. The local media was brutal, questioning everything from the roster construction to the coaching to the front office's decision-making. But even that wasn't the bottom. On February 7th, a heartbreaking 99-96 loss to the Dallas Mavericks. The very team that would go on to win the championship pushed the streak to 25 consecutive losses. Cleveland had led by 8 points with 7 minutes remaining. They had a chance to end the nightmare, but they collapsed again, allowing a 12-3 Dallas run to close the game. This broke the all-time NBA losing streak record regardless of season, surpassing the previous mark that had been shared by multiple teams across eras. The Philadelphia 76ers had lost 24 straight, spanning 2 seasons in 1972 and 73. The Cleveland Cavaliers now owned the most ignominious record in league history, the longest losing streak ever. The streak finally, mercifully ended at 26 games when Cleveland beat the Los Angeles Clippers on February 11th, 126-119 in overtime. The victory was so unexpected, so joyous. The players hugged on the court as if they had won a playoff series. Mo Williams scored 35 points, his best game of the entire season. Byron Scott smiled for the first time in months. The home crowd, what was left of it, gave the team a standing ovation. It was one of the most emotional regular season wins in franchise history, a moment of pure relief after months of agony. The Cavaliers finished the season 19-63, the worst record in the NBA. Let that sink in. The previous season, 61 wins. This season, 19 wins. A 42-game swing. A fall from the penthouse to the basement that had no modern parallel. No team in NBA history had ever experienced such a dramatic decline from one season to the next. The only comparable collapse was the San Antonio Spurs, who went from 59 wins in 1996 to 20 wins in 97, but that was due to injuries to David Robinson and other key players. Cleveland's collapse was entirely due to the departure of one player, no matter how great that player was. The roster turnover was part of it, of course. Delonte West had been traded to Minnesota. Zydrunas Ilgauskas had followed LeBron to Miami after being bought out. Shaquille O'Neal had signed with Boston. But the magnitude of the decline made an argument that went beyond roster construction. LeBron James hadn't just been the best player on the Cavaliers. He had been the entire franchise. He had been the offense, generating assists or scoring opportunities on nearly every possession. He had been the defense, capable of guarding every position and providing help wherever needed. He had been the culture, the leader who set the tone in practice and games. He had been the hope. the reason fans bought tickets and believed in championship possibilities. He had been the identity, the face of the franchise and the city. Without him, Cleveland discovered that it had been building a house on a single pillar, and when that pillar was removed, everything collapsed. The supporting cast that had looked competent alongside a generational talent was exposed as inadequate when asked to carry the load themselves. For Cleveland fans, the 26-game losing streak was salt in an already gaping wound. They had lost their hero, watched him celebrate on stage in Miami, seen Dan Gilbert's angry letter, and then watched helplessly as their team set records for futility. The Cavaliers wouldn't return to relevance until LeBron himself came back in 2014, completing one of the most remarkable circles in sports history. But in 2010 and 2011, Cleveland was the symbol of everything that can go wrong when a franchise bets everything on one player, and that player walks away. The middle of the 2010-2011 season brought several seismic events that reshaped the league's landscape, proving that the drama of NBA life extends far beyond the court. Chapter 6, Mid-Season Drama. On February 10th, Jerry Sloan resigned as head coach of the Utah Jazz, ending a 23-year coaching tenure that was the longest in any of the 4 major American professional sports leagues. It was one of the most shocking resignations in NBA history. Sloan had been the Jazz since 1988. He had coached Karl Malone and John Stockton through the greatest era in franchise history. He had been to 2 finals. He had won over 1,200 games, third most in NBA history at the time of his resignation, surpassing Pat Riley just 2 months earlier. The man was synonymous with Utah, Jazz basketball. Sloan and his longtime assistant, Phil Johnson, both stepped down the same day. The official reason was vague, with Sloan simply saying it was time. But reports suggested a deteriorating relationship with star point guard Deron Williams, one of the best players in the league. There had been a heated exchange during a game against the Chicago Bulls, and the tension had been building for months. Williams was a demanding player who wanted more freedom in the offense. Sloan was a demanding coach who wanted discipline and execution. The two were oil and water. Assistant Tyrone Corbin took over on an interim basis and was eventually named the full-time coach, but the aftershocks weren't done. Just 2 weeks after Sloan's resignation, the Jazz traded Deron Williams to the New Jersey Nets for Devin Harris, Derek Favors, and 2 first-round picks in the span of 14 days. Utah had lost its legendary coach and its franchise player. An era in Utah was definitively, brutally over. The Carmelo Anthony saga was the other dominant storyline through the winter months. Anthony had made it clear he wanted to be traded from Denver, preferably to the New York Knicks. The public posturing lasted months. Anthony's agent, the Denver front office, and multiple interested teams engaged in a complex public negotiation that dragged on from November through February. It was a soap opera that overshadowed the Nuggets' actual basketball and disrupted their locker room. On February 22nd, the saga finally ended. The Knicks completed a blockbuster 13-player, 3-team deal with the Denver Nuggets and Minnesota Timberwolves. Carmelo Anthony and Chauncey Billups came to New York. The Nuggets received a treasure trove in return: Wilson Chandler, Danilo Gallinari, Raymond Felton, Timofey Mozgov, a first-round pick, and 2 second-round picks. The Timberwolves sent Costa Koufos to Denver and received Eddie Curry and Anthony Randolph from New York, along with a second-round pick from Denver. The trade gutted the Knicks' depth in a way that would have consequences for years. They gave up their young core, their draft capital, and their flexibility, all for the privilege of pairing Carmelo with Amare Stoudemire. The duo would look spectacular at times, but would never build a true contender around themselves. For Denver, the trade was actually a franchise reset that worked out remarkably well. Gallinari became a productive player. and the draft picks helped rebuild the roster. The Carmelo trade also represented a philosophical debate that still rages in the NBA today. Is it better to build organically through the draft, or to acquire stars through trades and free agency? Denver's haul from the Anthony trade suggested that patience and asset accumulation could be just as valuable as landing a marquee name. In Detroit, things took a bizarre turn that would have been funny if they weren't so sad. On February 25th, the Pistons played the Philadelphia 76ers with only 6 active players: Tracy McGrady, Chris Wilcox, Tyshawn Prince, Ben Wallace, Rodney Stuckey, and Austin Day all sat out, reportedly in protest of head coach John Kuster. Jonas Jerebko and Terrico White were already out with injuries. Kester diplomatically called the situation an internal matter, but everyone knew what was happening. The Pistons were in full dysfunction, with players openly defying their coach. It was one of the most embarrassing episodes in franchise history. A low point for an organization that had won the championship just 7 years earlier. On a more uplifting note, the season produced several historic milestones. On February 10th, Ray Allen of the Boston Celtics surpassed Reggie Miller as the all-time leader in three-point field goals made. Allen drained his 2,562nd career three-pointer in a game against the Los Angeles Lakers, breaking a record that had seemed untouchable. What made the achievement even more impressive was that Allen accomplished it in 3 fewer seasons and roughly 300 fewer games than Miller had played. Allen's shooting form, his preparation rituals, and his longevity were unmatched. The record would stand for over a decade before Stephen Curry shattered it during the 2021-22 season. On April 1st, the Detroit Pistons retired Dennis Rodman's number 10 jersey in a ceremony at the Palace of Auburn Hills. Rodman, one of the most colorful and controversial players in NBA history, was honored during halftime of a game against the Chicago Bulls, the team he had helped win 3 championships. It was a moment that bridged eras and reminded fans of the Pistons' championship glory days. The New Orleans Hornets made history of a different kind when owner George Shinn sold the team to the NBA itself, making the Hornets the first franchise to be owned by the league. It was an unprecedented arrangement driven by financial difficulties and questions about the franchise's viability in New Orleans. The league would operate the team for 2 seasons before eventually selling it to Saints owner Tom Benson, who renamed the franchise the Pelicans. And then there was Yao Ming, the 7'6" Chinese center, one of the most popular international players in NBA history, suffered yet another season-ending stress fracture. He appeared in only 5 games for the Houston Rockets before his body betrayed him again. Yao had been plagued by foot and ankle injuries for years, each one more devastating than the last. He would announce his retirement that summer at the age of 30, ending a career that had been cut tragically short by injuries, but had done more to globalize basketball than perhaps any other player in history. While Miami's superteam grabbed the headlines, the most exciting story in basketball was unfolding in Chicago. Derrick Rose, in just his 3rd NBA season, was playing the best basketball of his life. Under Tom Thibodeau's demanding system, Rose evolved from a dynamic young point guard into the most electrifying player in the league. His combination of speed, athleticism, and fearlessness was unlike anything the NBA had seen at the point guard position. Rose attacked the rim with reckless abandon, finishing through contact against players much bigger than him. His floater became unstoppable. His mid-range game sharpened, and he was doing it all while leading the Bulls to the best record in basketball. Rose averaged 25 points and 7.7 assists per game, but the raw numbers didn't capture his impact. He wasn't just scoring. He was willing the Bulls to victory night after night with a combination of athleticism, fearlessness, and clutch gene that reminded older fans of a young Michael Jordan. Rose's ability to finish through contact was supernatural. He would drive into lanes that seemed impossible, absorb contact from players 6 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier, and somehow get the ball in the basket. His floater over taller defenders became an unstoppable weapon. A shot that opposing coaches couldn't scheme against because of Rose's unique combination of speed and touch. Chicago's roster was solid but unspectacular around him. Luol Deng was a reliable two-way wing who could guard multiple positions and hit open three-pointers. Joakim Noah anchored the defense at center with his communication, energy, and ability to switch on to smaller players. Carlos Boozer provided scoring in the post and was one of the few players on the roster capable of creating his own shot. Kyle Korver gave them elite three-point shooting off the bench. But Rose was the engine. Without him, the Bulls were ordinary, a collection of role players without a true star. With him, they were the best team in the league, a championship contender that played with precision and purpose. The Bulls finished 62-20, the best record in the NBA, and the franchise's best since Michael Jordan's 1996-97. Bulls went 69-13. They went 37-4 at home, one of the most dominant home records in recent memory. The United Center became a fortress, where opponents knew they were facing not just the Bulls, but the energy and expectation of a city that remembered what championship basketball looked like. They clinched home court advantage throughout the entire playoffs by early April. It was a stunning transformation from the previous season's 41-41 record under Vinny Del Negro. Chapter 7. The MVP Race. The MVP race was fascinating and controversial. Rose was the clear frontrunner for most of the season, but the debate raged. LeBron James had put up objectively superior individual numbers: 26.7 points, 7.5 rebounds, 7 assists per game. He led the league in player efficiency rating. By pure statistical analysis, LeBron was the better player, but the MVP has never been purely about statistics. Rose's case was built on narrative and impact, the intangible factors that separate good players from transcendent ones. He led the league's best team, not just in record, but in the way they played together as a cohesive unit. He was the sole star on a roster that had no business being this good, elevating role players and making everyone around him better. He did it in a major market for a storied franchise that understood championship expectations, under a demanding new coach who had transformed the team's culture in just one season. Many voters felt uncomfortable rewarding a player who had assembled his own super team and declared his intention to win multiple championships. They didn't want to reward the guy who had handpicked his supporting cast, and then complained when the going got tough early in the season. When the votes were tallied, Rose won in a landslide, receiving 113 of 121 first-place votes, the most decisive MVP victory since Tim Duncan in 2003. Only 8 voters placed LeBron first on their ballots, a stunning rejection from the media members who had covered his dominance throughout the season. The most interesting detail: LeBron didn't even finish second. LeBron finished third with 294 points, his lowest finish in MVP voting since his second season in the league. The voting breakdown revealed the extent of the backlash against LeBron's decision to join Miami. In a normal year, a player averaging 26.7 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 7 assists while leading his team to 58 wins would have been a serious MVP contender. But 2011 wasn't a normal year, and the voters made their feelings clear. Even LeBron himself seemed to acknowledge Rose deserved it. At 22 years old, Derrick Rose became the youngest MVP in NBA history. Standing at the podium, emotional, Rose credited his mother, his brothers, and the city of Chicago. Nobody knew that devastating injuries were just around the corner. For this one perfect season, Derrick Rose was the best player in basketball, and nobody could tell him otherwise. Chapter 8, All-Star Weekend. All-Star Weekend descended on Los Angeles in mid-February, taking over the Staples Center for a celebration of the league's brightest stars. The 2011 All-Star Game was played on February 20th, and the game was packed with storylines that reflected the season's broader themes of youth, star power, and history. The most dramatic moment belonged to Kobe Bryant, who won his record-tying fourth All-Star Game MVP award, joining Bob Pettit as the only four-time winners of the honor. Kobe scored 37 points, reminding everyone in the building and everyone watching at home that he was still Kobe, still capable of putting on a show when the lights were brightest. At 32, playing in his 13th All-Star Game, Bryant was a living bridge between basketball eras. Blake Griffin of the Los Angeles Clippers became the first rookie to play in the All-Star Game since Yao Ming in 2003. Griffin had earned his selection by dominating the first half of the season with the kind of highlight reel dunks that went viral. Before going viral was even a common phrase. He was dunking on 7-footers, jumping over cars in the slam dunk contest, and playing with a ferocity that made the Clippers relevant for the first time in years. His 20 consecutive double-doubles set a Clippers franchise record, surpassing Michael Cage's 19 from 1986 and 87. He would extend that streak to 27 before it ended. LeBron James recorded only the second triple-double in All-Star Game history, following in the footsteps of Michael Jordan, who had done it in 1997. Even in a meaningless exhibition game, LeBron's all-around brilliance was on full display. The slam dunk contest was highlighted by Griffin's iconic dunk over the hood of a Kia sedan. Griffin straddled the hood, had the ball lobbed to him from the sunroof, and slammed it home with two hands. The crowd went berserk. It was part athleticism, part theatrics, and wholly unforgettable. Whether you loved the showmanship or thought it was gimmicky, you couldn't deny it was one of the most memorable dunk contest moments in years. But perhaps the most impressive individual achievement of the entire season, and one that didn't get nearly the attention it deserved, belonged to Kevin Love of the Minnesota Timberwolves. After his incredible 31-rebound, 31-point game against the Knicks in November, Love just kept racking up double-doubles, game after game, week after week, month after month. It was a streak of consistency and dominance that was almost impossible to comprehend. On February 8th, Love recorded his 38th consecutive double-double against the Houston Rockets, surpassing Kevin Garnett's franchise record of 37. Garnett, the greatest player in Timberwolves history, had set that record during his prime years in Minnesota. Love was 22 years old and already surpassing the franchise's all-time great in the record books. The streak kept going. 40, 45, 50. Malone had set that record in the 1978 and 79 season when the game was played at a completely different pace. Love was doing this in the modern NBA, where possessions were more efficient and rebounds were harder to come by. Love's streak would eventually reach 53 games before ending, a record that stands to this day as one of the most remarkable achievements of sustained excellence in NBA history. What made Love's streak even more remarkable was the context. The Timberwolves were absolutely terrible, finishing 17-65, the worst record in the league. Love was putting up historic numbers on a historically bad team. There was no spacing around him, no elite playmakers setting him up, no defensive attention being diverted by other stars. Every team knew Love was going to get his stats, and they still couldn't stop him. Love's 15.2 rebounds per game represented the highest rebounding average since Dennis Rodman's 17.3 in the 1997-98 season. His combination of scoring and rebounding was reminiscent of the great power forwards of the 1970s and 80s. Players like Malone, Elvin Hayes, and Bob McAdoo, who dominated both the paint and the stat sheet. For a 6'10" power forward with a beautiful shooting stroke and an instinct for the ball that bordered on supernatural, Kevin Love was putting on one of the most quietly dominant individual seasons in modern NBA history. He wouldn't make the playoffs. He wouldn't win any awards beyond being named to the All-Star team, and the national media barely covered his accomplishments. But anyone paying attention knew they were watching something special. The kind of season that gets appreciated more and more as the years go by. Chapter 9, the stretch run, and stat leaders. As the season entered its final months, the playoff picture crystallized across both conferences, and the league's landscape became clearer. The contenders separated from the pretenders, and the statistical leaderboards told stories that would echo through basketball history. In the Eastern Conference, the Chicago Bulls locked up the #1 overall seed with 62 victories, clinching home court advantage throughout the entire playoffs. It was the franchise's best record since the Michael Jordan era, and the transformation under Tom Thibodeau was complete. Behind the Bulls, the Miami Heat settled into the second seed at 58-24, their big three operating at a high level after the early season struggles. The Boston Celtics, aging but dangerous, were the third seed at 56-26, with Rajon Rondo emerging as one of the most dynamic playmakers in the league. The Orlando Magic rounded out the top four at 52-30, with Dwight Howard anchoring a team that was quietly very good. The New York Knicks, energized by the Carmelo Anthony trade and the electricity Amare Stoudemire had brought to Madison Square Garden, secured the 6th seed in their first playoff appearance since 2004. It was a meaningful return to relevance for one of the league's most iconic franchises. The Philadelphia 76ers, under Doug Collins' steady hand, grabbed the 7th seed, and the Indiana Pacers snuck into the 8th spot with a 37-45 record, the worst record of any playoff team. The Pacers had fired Jim O'Brien in late January and promoted assistant Frank Vogel to interim head coach. Vogel, who was just 37 years old, would become one of the most significant coaching hires in the league over the next decade, eventually leading the Lakers to a championship in 2020. The Western Conference was absolutely loaded, one of the deepest and most talented fields in recent playoff memory. The San Antonio Spurs, led by the timeless trio of Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili, claimed the top seed with 61 wins. San Antonio had been a model of consistency for over a decade, making the playoffs for the 14th consecutive season. The Spurs played beautiful basketball under Greg Popovich, an offense built on ball movement, cutting, and unselfish play that made them one of the hardest teams in the league to prepare for. The Los Angeles Lakers, still the defending back-to-back champions with Kobe Bryant, Phil Jackson, Pau Gasol, and Andrew Bynum, were the 2nd seed with 57 wins. Despite their record, there were whispers that the Lakers weren't the same team that had won titles in 2009 and 2010. They were a year older, their bench was thinner, and the chemistry seemed slightly off, as if the hunger that had driven them to consecutive championships had faded just enough to make a difference. The Dallas Mavericks, at 57-25, earned the 3rd seed despite having the same record as the Lakers, because Los Angeles had won the Pacific Division title. The seeding seemed inconsequential at the time. In hindsight, it was everything, because it meant Dallas would face Portland in the first round instead of a potentially tougher matchup, and it set up a second-round collision with the Lakers. The Oklahoma City Thunder, with Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden coming off the bench, were the 4th seed with 55 wins. They had won their first Northwest Division title, and were the clear rising power of the Western Conference. Durant won the scoring title at 27.7 points per game, his 2nd consecutive scoring crown at just 22 years old. Westbrook averaged 21.9 points, 8.2 assists, and 4.6 rebounds, establishing himself as one of the most explosive players in the game. And Harden, the bearded sixth man, averaged 12.2 points in just 26 minutes per game, a sixth man who would have been a starter on most teams. Denver, Portland, New Orleans, and Memphis filled out the remaining playoff spots, each team bringing something unique to the postseason. Denver had reinvented itself after the Carmelo trade. Portland was trying to push through despite injuries to Brandon Roy. New Orleans had Chris Paul running the show in the franchise's final playoff appearance as the Hornets. And Memphis, the 8th seed, was about to make history. The statistical leaders that season told fascinating stories about the state of the league. Kevin Durant led in scoring. Kevin Love led in rebounding. Steve Nash of the Phoenix Suns led in assists at 11.4 per game at age 36, proving he was still among the most brilliant playmakers ever, despite his team missing the playoffs. Chris Paul led in steals at 2.35 per game. Andrew Bogut of the Milwaukee Bucks led in blocks at 2.58 per game. And Stephen Curry, still just a second-year player on the Golden State Warriors, quietly led the league in free throw percentage at 93.4%. Nobody was talking about Curry yet. He was a skinny guard on a bad team who could shoot the lights out. The basketball world had absolutely no idea what was coming. LeBron James led the league in player efficiency rating, the most comprehensive individual statistical measure of overall performance. Dwight Howard led in double-doubles with 66. LeBron recorded the season-high 51 points in a single game. Rajon Rondo of the Celtics dished out 24 assists in a single game. And JaVale McGee of the Washington Wizards, in a preview of his wonderfully unpredictable career, swatted 12 shots in one game. On March 11th, the Golden State Warriors and Orlando Magic combined to hit 36 three-pointers in a single game, setting a new NBA record. It was a preview of the three-point revolution that would overtake the league in the coming years. The Warriors alone hit 21 threes that night, with Darrell Wright and Stephen Curry leading the barrage. Wright had already set a Warriors franchise record earlier in the season with 9 three-pointers in a game against the Raptors. Basketball was changing, becoming a perimeter-oriented game, and the seeds were being planted right here in 2011. The Mavericks quietly finished with the league's highest team assist rate at 23.8 per game, tied with the Houston Rockets. That number was a direct reflection of the unselfish ball movement that Rick Carlisle demanded. Dallas didn't run in isolation. Heavy offense. They moved the ball, found the open man, and trusted that good shots would come from good process. It was the kind of basketball philosophy that sometimes gets lost in the star-driven NBA. But it was devastatingly effective. Dallas had an old roster by NBA standards, and the media loved to remind everyone of it. Jason Kidd was 37. Sean Marion was 32. Dirk Nowitzki was 32. Peja Stojakovic was 33. Jason Terry was 33. The average age of their playoff rotation was somewhere north of 30, practically geriatric in a league that worships youth and athleticism. Most analysts, most writers, most talking heads on television saw the Mavericks as a good regular season team that would fade in the playoffs, just as they had so many times before. Dallas had earned a reputation as a team that performed well from October through April, and then folded when it mattered. Nobody was ready for what Dallas was about to do. The 2011 NBA playoffs began on April 16th, and the first round produced one of the greatest upsets in recent memory. Chapter 10. The playoffs begin. The 8th seed Memphis Grizzlies, making the playoffs for the first time since 2006, were matched against the number 1 seed San Antonio Spurs. And absolutely no one outside of Memphis gave them a chance. The Grizzlies had won 46 games. The Spurs had won 61. San Antonio had Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili, a core that had won 4 championships together. They had Greg Pop, Ovich, one of the greatest coaches in NBA history. They had 14 consecutive playoff appearances, and a system that had made them the gold standard of NBA excellence. Memphis had Zach Randolph, a bruising power forward with a checkered past who had reinvented himself as a leader. They had Mark Gasol, the younger and less famous Gasol brother, who was quietly developing into one of the smartest centers in the league. They had Mike Conley, a steady, unspectacular point guard who made the right play every single time. They had Tony Allen, undrafted out of Oklahoma State, who had become one of the most feared perimeter defenders in basketball. And they had a head coach, Lionel Hollins, who preached defense, toughness, and playing together. On paper, this was a massive mismatch. The Spurs were deeper, more experienced, and more talented at virtually every position. History was against Memphis, too. In the franchise's 3 previous playoff appearances, they had been swept each time, winning a total of 0 playoff games. 0. But the Grizzlies didn't care about paper. They didn't care about history. They didn't care about matchups or analytics or what the experts said on television. They cared about toughness, and they had more of it than anyone else in the building. Game 1 in San Antonio was the announcement. Memphis came into the AT&T Center and punched the Spurs in the mouth. Zach Randolph was dominant in the post, bullying his way to the basket against San Antonio's front court. Mark Gasol was brilliant, using his passing and positioning to create easy looks for teammates. Tony Allen hounded Tony Parker, disrupting the pick-and-roll action that was the foundation of San Antonio's offense. Memphis won on the road, and it was the first playoff victory in Grizzlies franchise history. After 3 playoff appearances and 0 wins, Memphis had finally broken through. The Spurs took Game 2 at home, restoring a sense of normalcy. The 61-win team was supposed to be better than an 8 seed. One bad game was an aberration, not a trend. But when the series shifted to Memphis for Games 3 and 4, the FedEx Forum was rocking with an energy that the Grizzlies had never experienced. Memphis was a city that had been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed by the national basketball media for years. The fans knew exactly what that felt like, and they poured every ounce of frustration into their support for this team. Memphis won both home games. The Grizzlies now led the series 3-1. They were 1 win away from completing one of the most stunning upsets in NBA playoff history. The Spurs, showing the championship pedigree that had defined their era, responded with a Game 5 victory in San Antonio. Duncan and Parker found another gear, and the Spurs' experience showed. The series was now 3-2, and Game 6 would be in Memphis. Game 6 was electric. The FedEx Forum was louder than it had ever been. Every possession felt like a matter of life and death. The Grizzlies came out with everything they had, playing with the desperation and joy of a team that knew this moment might never come again. The defense was suffocating. Randolph was a force. Conley made big shots when the moment called for them, and when the final buzzer sounded, the Grizzlies had done it. Memphis had closed out the San Antonio Spurs, winning the series 4-2. The 61-win, number 1 seeded San Antonio Spurs were gone, eliminated by the 8 seed. Memphis became just the 4th 8th-seeded team in NBA history to knock off a number 1 seed, and only the 2nd to do it in the best-of-7 format that had been in place since 2003. The only other team to accomplish this feat was the 2007 Golden State Warriors, who had famously upset the Dallas Mavericks. That upset had happened 4 years earlier, and it was now part of Dirk Nowitzki's painful history. The Grizzlies' grit and grind identity was born in this series. It wasn't a slogan. It was a lifestyle, a philosophy, a way of playing basketball that reflected the blue-collar character of Memphis itself. Zach Randolph was a beast in the paint. Mark Gasol controlled the middle with intelligence and touch. Mike Conley was steady and smart, never flashy, always reliable. Tony Allen was a defensive menace who turned opposing guards into nervous wrecks. This team would become a perennial contender and a fan favorite across the league for the next several years. But it all started here in April of 2011 with this magical, improbable, unforgettable first-round upset. Chapter 11, the first round. Elsewhere in the first round, the results were a mix of expected outcomes and compelling stories. In the East, the Chicago Bulls, the #1 overall seed, faced the 8th-seeded Indiana Pacers. It should have been a walkover for Chicago, but the Pacers made it interesting. Every game in the first 4 contests was decided by 6 points or fewer. Derrick Rose was sensational, scoring 39 points in Game 1 and 36 in Game 2, putting the league on notice that the MVP was ready for the postseason stage. Danny Granger was excellent in a losing cause for Indiana, but the Bulls' depth and defense were too much. After the Pacers took Game 4 to avoid the sweep, Chicago closed it out with a dominant 116-89 victory in Game 5. Rose averaged over 28 points for the series. The Bulls moved on, looking like genuine title contenders. The Heat handled the Philadelphia 76ers 4-1, though the young Sixers showed fight. Thaddeus Young and June Holiday gave Miami some trouble, but the talent gap was simply too large. LeBron, Wade, and Bosh were too much firepower for a Sixers team that had gotten to the playoffs largely on hustle and Doug Collins' coaching. It was the Heat's first playoff series win since their championship in 2006 and the first postseason series victory for Eric Spoelstra as a head coach. The Boston Celtics swept the New York Knicks 4-0. A humbling end to New York's first playoff appearance in 7 years. The Carmelo Anthony trade had given the Knicks star power, but it had also gutted their depth. Boston's defense, still elite under Doc Rivers, suffocated the Knicks' offense. Rajon Rondo was masterful, distributing the ball with precision and controlling the pace of every game. It was a reminder that regular season excitement doesn't always translate to playoff success, especially against a battle-tested team like the Celtics. The biggest surprise in the Eastern Conference first round was the Atlanta Hawks knocking off the Orlando Magic in 6 games. Despite Dwight Howard's extraordinary 46-point outburst in Game 1, tying Tracy McGrady's franchise record, Orlando couldn't sustain that level of play. The Hawks, led by Joe Johnson, Josh Smith, and Al Horford, won 4 of the next 5 games. It was a stunning exit for a Magic team that many had picked as a dark horse finals contender. Howard's dominant Game 1 would stand as the high water mark of his Orlando tenure, and the Magic's trajectory would shift dramatically in the coming years. In the West, beyond Memphis, Dallas beat Portland in 6 games, though the Trailblazers gave the Mavericks everything they could handle. Portland pulled off a remarkable 23-point comeback in Game 4, to even the series at 2 games apiece, showing the kind of resilience that had made them a tough out all season. But Dirk Nowitzki was relentless, and Dallas's veteran experience proved decisive in Games 5 and 6. It was Portland's 6th consecutive first-round series loss, extending one of the most frustrating streaks in the franchise's history. They wouldn't return to the playoffs until 2014. The Lakers handled the New Orleans Hornets in 6 games. Though the Hornets stole Game 1 in Los Angeles, one of the few bright spots in the franchise's history before they were eventually renamed the Pelicans. Chris Paul was brilliant in defeat, reminding everyone why he was considered one of the best point guards in the world. But the Lakers' size and experience, with Kobe Bryant, Paul Gasol, and Andrew Bynum controlling the paint, was too much over 7 games, and the Oklahoma City Thunder eliminated the Denver Nuggets 4-1, marking Kevin Durant's first career playoff series victory. Durant was 22 years old and already the best scorer in basketball. Russell Westbrook added energy and explosiveness, and James Harden, still coming off the bench in his second season, showed the kind of shot creation ability that would eventually make him an MVP. The Thunder were young, talented, and hungry. The future of the Western Conference was being built right before everyone's eyes. Chapter 12. The Conference Semifinals. The conference semifinals produced an earthquake that nobody, not the media, not the odds makers, not even the most optimistic Dallas fans, saw coming. The Dallas Mavericks, the 3rd seed, were matched against the defending champion Los Angeles Lakers, the 2nd seed. On paper, this was supposed to be the Lakers' series to lose, and they weren't supposed to lose it. The Lakers had won back-to-back championships in 2009 and 2010. They had Kobe Bryant, who was still Kobe Bryant, still one of the 5 best players alive, still capable of dropping 50 on any given night. They had Paul Gasol, one of the most skilled big men in the world. They had Andrew Bynum, a physical force in the paint who was coming into his prime. And they had Phil Jackson, the Zen master himself, the 11-time championship-winning coach who had never, in his legendary career, been swept in a playoff series. Ever. Dallas was supposed to be the team that gave the Lakers a competitive series before bowing out in 5 or 6 games. The Mavericks were old. They were slow. They had Dirk, who everyone loved as a regular season player, but nobody trusted in the playoffs. Instead, the Mavericks didn't just beat the Lakers, they humiliated them. Game 1 set the tone in spectacular fashion. The Mavericks trailed by 16 points in the 4th quarter in Los Angeles. 16 points in the 4th quarter, on the road, against the defending champions. In the history of the NBA playoffs, teams that trail by 16 in the 4th quarter almost never win. The math, the history, the momentum, everything says the game is over. Dallas stormed back. Dirk Nowitzki scored 12 of his 28 points in the 4th quarter. Jason Terry hit 3-pointers that sucked the life out of Staples Center. The Mavericks' defense tightened. The Lakers' offense seized up. And before anyone could process what was happening, Dallas had completed one of the great comebacks in playoff history. The final score, 96-94. Dallas, the Lakers, for the first time since 2007, had lost a playoff game at home when leading a series. The defending champions had lost Game 1 on their home floor. The shockwaves rippled through the league. Game 2 was more of the same. Dallas won again in Los Angeles, taking a 2-0 lead. The defending back-to-back champions had lost both home games. The body language on the Laker bench was awful. Kobe's frustration was visible. A tight jaw, hard glances at teammates who weren't meeting his standards. Paul Gasol looked lost. Andrew Bynum seemed disengaged. Phil Jackson, who had seen everything in 30 years of coaching, seemed genuinely uncertain about what to do. When the series shifted to Dallas for Game 3, the Mavericks showed absolutely no mercy. The Lakers actually built a 7-point lead in the 4th quarter and seemed to have found their championship composure. But Dallas came roaring back. Dirk hit fadeaway after fadeaway. The Mavericks' role players knocked down open shots. The defense clamped down when it mattered. Dallas won 98-92, going up 3-0. The defending champions were on the brink of something that had never happened to Phil Jackson in his entire career. A sweep. Game 4 was an absolute, total, comprehensive demolition. It wasn't a basketball game. It was a funeral. Dallas set an NBA playoff record by draining 23-point field goals, with Jason Terry hitting 9 of them by himself. 9 three-pointers from one player. In one playoff game, Terry was unconscious, hitting shots from everywhere on the court with a confidence that bordered on reckless. The final score was 122-86, a 36-point blowout of the defending champions. But the game's legacy isn't defined by the score. It's defined by what happened in garbage time, with the game long since decided. Andrew Bynum committed one of the most vicious fouls in recent playoff memory. J.J. Barea, the 5'10" backup point guard, was driving for a fast break layup. Bynum, a 7-foot, 270-pound center, clotheslined Barea with a forearm to the chest, sending the little guard crashing to the floor. It was a flagrant foul, an ejection, and a moment that crystallized the Lakers' frustration. They couldn't beat Dallas with basketball, so they had resorted to this. 45 seconds later, Lamar Odom was ejected for an elbow. 2 Lakers thrown out of a game they had already lost by 30. Phil Jackson, the Zen master, the winningest coach in playoff history, sat on the bench watching his dynasty crumble, his face a mask of resignation. The Dallas Mavericks had swept the defending champion, Los Angeles Lakers. It was the first sweep of Phil Jackson's legendary career, a career that included 25 playoff series victories. It was the end of the Kobe Gasol era in Los Angeles, and for Jackson, who announced his retirement shortly after, it was the end. Period. The greatest coaching career in NBA history ended with a sweep at the hands of a team nobody had believed in. For Kobe Bryant, it was a bitter pill. He had won 5 championships. But his quest for a 6th, which would have tied him with Michael Jordan, was over. Kobe would play 5 more seasons in Los Angeles, but he would never return to the finals. This was his last shot at a 6th ring, and it ended in the most decisive way possible. This series was the moment the basketball world collectively realized that Dallas was for real. This wasn't the same Mavericks team that had choked away a 2-0 finals lead in 2006. This wasn't the team that had been upset by the 8th-seeded Warriors in 2007. Something had changed. Dirk Nowitzki was on a mission, and he was bringing an entire roster of battle-tested, chip-on-their-shoulder veterans along for the ride. In the Eastern Conference semifinals, the Heat faced the Celtics in a rematch of the previous season's second-round series that Boston had won. The storylines were rich. LeBron against his old Eastern Conference rivals. The aging Big Three of Pierce, Garnett, and Allen trying to hold off the new superteam. But this time, Miami was a different beast. LeBron and Wade were in sync, and the Heat's defense had improved dramatically over the course of the season. The Heat won the series 4-1, with only one truly competitive game. Miami's speed and athleticism overwhelmed Boston's aging legs. Pierce and Garnett still had flashes of their old selves, but they couldn't sustain the effort over 4+ games against younger, fresher opponents. Rondo was brilliant as always, but he needed more help than his teammates could provide. Game 4 of that series turned out to be Shaquille O'Neal's final NBA game, though nobody knew it at the time. Shaq played just 12 minutes, his body finally betraying the dominance it had once carried so effortlessly. 3 weeks later, on June 1st, Shaq would announce his retirement, closing the book on one of the most remarkable careers the sport had ever seen. 15 All-Star selections, 4 championships, 3 Finals MVPs, 1 regular season MVP, and a personality that had transcended basketball and made him a global icon. The Big Diesel was done. In the Western Conference semifinals, the Thunder faced the Grizzlies in what turned out to be a 7-game thriller. Memphis had already pulled off the miracle upset against San Antonio, and they weren't ready to stop. The Grizzlies won Games 1 and 2 in Oklahoma City, stunning the Thunder and their home crowd. Nobody had expected this. Memphis, the 8th seed, was up 2-0 against the 4th-seeded Thunder in their building. Oklahoma City responded with 3 consecutive wins to take a 3-2 lead, with Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook asserting their will through sheer talent and athleticism. But Memphis refused to die, winning Game 6 to force a decisive Game 7. The 7th game was played in Oklahoma City, and the Thunder's talent finally won out. Durant, Westbrook, and Harden combined for 63 points, and the Thunder's defense tightened in the second half. Memphis's magical run was over. They had gone from never winning a playoff game in franchise history to pushing a vastly more talented team to 7 games in the second round. The grit and grind Grizzlies had announced themselves as a force to be reckoned with for years to come. Oklahoma City advanced to the Western Conference Finals for the first time since the franchise had been the Seattle Supersonics back in 1996. The future was now in Oklahoma City. Chapter 13, the Conference Finals. The Eastern Conference Finals matched the top 2 stories of the season: Derrick Rose's Chicago Bulls against LeBron James's Miami Heat. It was the matchup everyone wanted. The Bulls had the best record in basketball at 62-20. They had home court advantage throughout the entire playoffs. They had the league MVP. They had the coach of the year. They had the best defense in the NBA. By every regular season metric, the Bulls were the better team. The Heat had something the Bulls didn't: 3 future Hall of Famers on the same roster. LeBron James, Dwyane Wade, and Chris Bosh represented the kind of top-end talent that regular season records can't account for. When the game slows down in the playoffs, when every possession matters, when adjustments happen series to series, having multiple superstars who can create their own shot becomes an overwhelming advantage. It was supposed to be a war. It wasn't. Miami won Game 1 in Chicago, 82-75, immediately seizing home court advantage and silencing the United Center crowd. The Heat's defense was suffocating, and LeBron was locked in on both ends of the floor. He guarded Rose directly for long stretches, using his size and length to make life miserable for the MVP. Wade provided secondary scoring and playmaking. Bosh was the release valve when the defense collapsed. The Bulls fought back to win Game 2 at home, 175, in a blowout that gave Chicago fans hope. Rose was aggressive. The defense was stifling, and the Heat looked rattled for a brief moment. It seemed like this could be the epic 7-game showdown everyone wanted. But then Miami won 3 consecutive games to close out the series, 4-1, and each victory was more demoralizing than the last. Game 3 in Miami was a grinding defensive battle that the Heat won on their home floor. Games 4 and 5 exposed the fundamental truth about this matchup. The Bulls had 1 star, and the Heat had 3. The defining image of the series was LeBron James guarding Derrick Rose. The player who many believed should have won the MVP was defending the man who actually did win it. And LeBron was brilliant, terrifyingly brilliant, on both ends of the floor. He shut down Rose's driving lanes. He contested every mid-range pull-up. He forced Rose into difficult, off-balance shots. The numbers were staggering. Rose went 1 for 15 against James in the fourth quarters of games, 4 and 5 combined. He shot 6% when guarded by LeBron over the final 2 games of the series. The league's most explosive offensive player was neutralized, contained, and ultimately defeated by the league's most complete player. Chicago's season ended with a thud, and the contrast was devastating. The Bulls had been the best team in basketball for 6 months. They had the MVP, the coach of the year, the best record, and home court advantage. and they lost 4-1 to a team that was simply more talented. It was a harsh reminder that in the NBA playoffs, star power trumps everything. Rose had been spectacular all year, but against Miami's length, athleticism, and defensive versatility, his limitations were exposed. He needed a second star, a player who could create his own shot and take pressure off him in crunch time. The Bulls didn't have that player. Luol Deng was a fine two-way forward, but not a primary scorer. Carlos Boozer was a talented offensive player, but not a go-to option when the game tightened. Joakim Noah was an elite defensive center, but couldn't create offense. Chicago would spend the summer trying to find that second star, pursuing players who could share the burden with Rose. But fate had other, far crueler plans for Derrick Rose. The following April, in the first game of the 2012 playoffs, Rose would tear his ACL, beginning a heartbreaking series of injuries that would rob the basketball world of one of its most exciting players. The 2010-2011 season would stand as the peak of Rose's career, a magical year that ended one round short of the promised land. In the Western Conference Finals, Dallas faced Oklahoma City in a matchup that pitted experience against youth, discipline against athleticism, the old guard against the new wave. The Thunder were young, talented, and dangerous. Kevin Durant was 22 and averaging 28 points per game in the playoffs. Russell Westbrook was a force of nature, attacking the rim with reckless aggression. James Harden, still coming off the bench in his second season, was developing into one of the most skilled shot creators in the league. They had the energy, the speed, and the talent to beat anyone. But the Mavericks had something the Thunder didn't have yet: the wisdom that comes from failure. Dallas had been through playoff heartbreak before. They had been embarrassed before. They had been counted out before. Every player on that roster had scars, and those scars made them tougher, smarter, and more dangerous than a young team that hadn't yet learned how to lose. Oklahoma City won Game 1 at home, and for a moment, it looked like the Thunder's youth and athleticism would overwhelm Dallas's aging roster. But the Mavericks responded. They won Game 2 in Oklahoma City, evening the series on the road. Then they won Games 3, 4, and 5 in dominant fashion, closing out the Thunder 4-1. Dirk was masterful throughout the series, scoring efficiently and making the right play at every crucial moment. Shawn Marion played elite defense on Durant, making the scoring champion work for every bucket. Jason Terry provided critical scoring off the bench, hitting big shots when the momentum seemed to be shifting. And Jason Kidd ran the offense with the precision and patience of a point guard who had seen everything in his 18-year career. Kidd couldn't jump anymore, couldn't blow past defenders, couldn't do half the things he'd done as a young player in Phoenix and New Jersey. But he could think, and in the playoffs, thinking beats running almost every time. The Mavericks were going back to the finals for the first time since 2006. Standing in their way was the same team that had broken their hearts 5 years earlier. The Miami Heat, the same franchise, the same arena, some of the same players. The basketball gods have a sense of humor, and in 2011, they were writing one of their greatest scripts. The stage was set for one of the most dramatic finals in NBA history. It was also, remarkably, a rematch. The Dallas Mavericks and Miami Heat had met in the finals just 5 years earlier, in 2006, and that series still haunted Dallas like a ghost. The Mavericks had been up 2-0 in that series before the Heat, led by a superhuman Dwyane Wade, won 4 consecutive games to steal the championship. It was the most painful loss in franchise history. And every veteran on the Dallas roster who had been there, Dirk Nowitzki, Jason Terry, carried the scars. Now the teams were meeting again, but the circumstances were entirely different. This time, Miami wasn't just Dwyane Wade's team. It was LeBron James's superteam, the most scrutinized and most hated roster in professional sports. The Heat had assembled their big three specifically to win championships. They had promised multiple titles. They had dismantled the best team in the East to get here. And they had home court advantage by virtue of their 58-24 regular season record. Dallas entered as the underdog, despite having swept the defending champion Lakers and dispatched the Thunder. The Mavericks were old. Their best player was a 32-year-old European power forward who had never won it all. Their point guard was 37. Their key defenders were in their early 30s. By every conventional measure, this team shouldn't have been here. Nobody outside of the Mavericks locker room, and possibly a few die-hard Dallas fans, believed they could beat the Heat. But there was something different about this Dallas team. Something that couldn't be measured in stats, or age, or athleticism. They had a quiet confidence, a steely determination that came from years of failure, and the burning desire to rewrite their story. Chapter 14, the Finals. The 2011 NBA Finals would prove to be a story of character, resilience, and one man's refusal to be denied any longer. It would also become the defining chapter in the career of LeBron James, though not in the way he had imagined. Game 1 was played on May 31st in Miami, the first finals game held in the month of May since 1986. The Heat's defense clamped down early, holding the Mavericks to just 17 points in the first quarter and shooting 28% themselves. Dallas actually led by 8 points early in the third quarter. But Miami stormed back. LeBron James scored 24 points, and Dwyane Wade grabbed 10 rebounds as the Heat outscored Dallas 49-40 in the second half. Dirk Nowitzki led all scorers with 27, but he injured his finger in the fourth quarter, tearing a tendon. He stayed in the game wearing a splint. Miami won 92-84. Game 2 is where this series changed. Dallas trailed by 15 points in the second half. And in most finals, that kind of deficit against a super team is a death sentence. The Mavericks didn't care. Led by Dirk and Jason Terry, Dallas clawed back. With 26.7 seconds left, Nowitzki hit a three-pointer to give Dallas a 93-90 lead. But Mario Chalmers answered with a three of his own just 2 seconds later when Jason Terry left him wide open. 93 all. Jason Kidd calmly ran the clock down. Then Nowitzki, playing with his injured left hand, drove to the basket and made a layup with 3.6 seconds remaining. Miami had no timeouts. Dwyane Wade's desperation. Three-pointer at the buzzer hit the back of the rim and bounced away. Dallas won 95-93. The 15-point comeback was the biggest in a finals game since the Celtics' 24-point rally against the Lakers in the 2008 finals. The Heat's 9-game home playoff winning streak was over. The series shifted to Dallas for games 3 and 4. The Heat, stung by the Game 2 loss, came out aggressive. Miami led most of the game and built a 14-point advantage. The Mavericks fought back again, cutting the lead to nothing in the fourth quarter. With 39.6 seconds left and the score tight, LeBron found Chris Bosh for a 20-foot baseline jumper that effectively sealed the game. Dirk had a chance to force overtime but missed a contested fadeaway at the buzzer. Miami won 88-86 and led the series 2-1. It was the Heat's 6th win in their last 7 finals games, dating back to 2006. Before Game 4, Dirk Nowitzki was listed as questionable. He had a fever of 101 degrees. He was sick, exhausted, and physically compromised. Reports leaked that LeBron James and Dwyane Wade had mocked Nowitzki before the game, coughing and pretending to be sick during their pre-game walkthrough. Whether they were actually making fun of Dirk or just joking around didn't matter. The basketball world saw it as disrespectful, and it added fuel to an already emotional narrative. The game was a classic, featuring 12 lead changes and 15 ties. Miami went up 74-65 early in the fourth quarter on a baseline jump shot by Udonis Haslem. It looked like the Heat were about to take a commanding 3-1 series lead. Then Jason Terry took over. He scored 4 quick points after a timeout, similar to the 6 straight he'd scored coming back from 15 down in Game 2. Dallas grabbed their first lead of the fourth quarter with 5 minutes and 15 seconds left on a fast break layup by Terry. The Mavericks held on, up 82-81 with 20 seconds left after Wade missed one of 2 free throws. Dirk drove to the basket and made a layup with 14.4 seconds remaining. Wade dunked with 9 seconds left to cut it to 3, and Terry sealed it with 2 free throws. The final play was chaotic. Wade fumbled the inbounds pass with 6.7 seconds left, barely saving it from a backcourt violation with a diving save. The ball ended up in Mike Miller's hands. His desperation, 3-pointer airballed at the buzzer. Dallas won 86-83. The series was tied 2-2. And here was the stat that defined the game. LeBron James scored just 8 total points on 3 for 11 shooting, including going 0 for 6 when guarded by Jason Kidd or Jason Terry. The best player in the world had been invisible in the biggest game of his career. After 4 low-scoring, grinded-out games, Game 5 finally saw both teams crack 100 points. It was played in Dallas, and it was the night when the Mavericks seized control of the series. Dallas connected on 13 of 19 three-point attempts. Jason Terry, Jason Kidd, and JJ. Barea combined for 10 of those 13. But the game wasn't decided by long-range shooting alone. With less than 5 minutes left, Miami led 99-95 after Dwyane Wade hit a 3 to cap a 9-0 run. The Heat seemed to have all the momentum. Then, Rick Carlisle made a coaching decision that changed the series. Unhappy with Jason Terry's defense, Carlisle pulled him from the game and told him point blank, "Refocus. I'm putting you right back in." After less than a minute on the bench, Terry returned and Carlisle ran the offense through him for the rest of the game. What followed was a devastating 15-3 Mavericks run. With Miami leading 100-97, Terry passed to Dirk, who drew a double team and kicked it back to Terry for a game tying 3. Dirk then drove baseline on Chris Bosh for a 2-handed dunk to put Dallas up 102-100 with 2 minutes and 44 seconds left. After LeBron was called for an offensive foul, with Tyson Chandler drawing the charge, Terry found Kidd for another wide-open 3 that pushed the lead to 105-100 with a minute and 26 seconds remaining. After Chandler blocked Wade and Bosh made 1 of 2 free throws, Terry delivered the dagger. With James closely guarding him, Terry knocked down a 28-foot three-pointer to make it 108-101 with 33 seconds left. Dallas won 112-103. They led the series 3-2 and were going back to Miami, needing just 1 more win. It's worth noting that throughout this playoff run, Dirk Nowitzki was putting together one of the most remarkable free throw shooting performances in postseason history. During Game 5 against the Thunder in the conference finals, Nowitzki went 24 for 24 from the free throw line, setting a new NBA playoff record for most free throws made without a miss in a single game. 24 attempts, 24 makes, perfect. Under playoff pressure, with everything on the line, Dirk didn't miss once. It was a testament to his concentration, his technique, and his ability to perform when the stakes were at their absolute highest. June 12, 2011. American Airlines Arena, Miami, Florida. The Dallas Mavericks needed 1 win to capture the franchise's first championship. The Heat needed to win 2 straight to keep their superteam dream alive. LeBron James made his first 4 shots, and Miami jumped to a 20-11 lead. It looked like the Heat were going to force a Game 7. Then the Mavericks shifted to a zone defense, and everything changed. Dallas went on a 21-4 run in 5.5 minutes. The zone confused Miami's offense completely. Players stood around. The ball movement evaporated. Dallas made 9 of 12 shots during the run, with Deshaun Stevenson hitting back-to-back three-pointers in a span of 24 seconds. The Mavericks took a 40-28 lead. Miami fought back with a 14-0 run of their own to tie the game at 42. A scuffle at midcourt during a timeout led to technical fouls on Stevenson, Udonis Haslem, and Mario Chalmers. The game was tense, physical, and emotional. In the second half, LeBron James disappeared again. He didn't score from the time he made a layup midway through the third quarter, until a layup with 1 minute and 49 seconds remaining in the third. Dallas led by 9 heading into the fourth quarter, after Ian Mahinmi hit a buzzer-beating basket. The Mavericks built a 12-point lead with 8 minutes left and never looked back. With 2 minutes and 27 seconds remaining, Nowitzki hit a jump shot to push the lead to 99-89. The celebration was beginning on the Dallas bench. Jason Terry led all scorers with 27 points. Dirk Nowitzki had a poor first half, shooting just 1 for 12, but finished with 21 points, 11 rebounds, and the moments that mattered. The final score was 105-95. The Dallas Mavericks were NBA champions. When the final buzzer sounded, Dirk Nowitzki didn't celebrate on the court. He walked straight to the locker room, overcome with emotion, tears streaming down his face. He returned to the court for the trophy presentation and was named Finals MVP, becoming the first German player to win the award, his voice cracking. Dirk could barely speak through his emotions. The Dallas Mavericks became the first team in NBA history to win the finals, after trailing both 1-0 and 2-1 in the same series. They did it with a roster that the basketball world had written off. They did it against the most talented team on the planet. Heart does. No discussion of the 2011 finals is complete without addressing what might be the most bewildering performance by a superstar in finals history. LeBron James, widely considered the best basketball player on the planet, had one of the most confounding series any great player has ever had on the championship stage. Chapter 15, The Collapse of LeBron James. The raw numbers tell part of the story. LeBron averaged just 17.8 points per game in the finals, a staggering drop from his regular season average of 26.7. He shot under 50% from the field. His free throw attempts plummeted as he repeatedly deferred and pulled back from contact rather than attacking the basket. But the raw numbers don't capture how bizarre, how inexplicable his disappearance was. It wasn't that LeBron played poorly throughout the series. He had stretches of brilliance. He scored 24 points in Game 1, had a solid all-around game in Game 3, and showed flashes of the LeBron the world knew and feared. The problem was what happened when the games mattered most. When the fourth quarter arrived and the margin between winning and losing shrank to nothing. In the fourth quarters of Games 2 through 5, LeBron James was a ghost. In Game 4, he scored just 8 total points on 3 for 11 shooting. He went 0 for 6 when guarded by Jason Kidd or Jason Terry, two players who were older, slower, and significantly less athletic. In the fourth quarters of Games 4 and 5, he scored a combined 4 points. The league's most unstoppable offensive force had become stoppable, and nobody could explain why. The body language told the story even when the statistics couldn't. LeBron drifted to the perimeter. He passed up open driving lanes. He deferred to Wade on possessions where the play was clearly designed for him. He posted up on the block and then kicked the ball out rather than going to work. He looked, for lack of a better word, afraid. Not afraid of his opponents, but afraid of something else. Something internal. The mocking of Nowitzki's illness before Game 4 made the optics even worse. Before the game, cameras caught LeBron and Wade fake coughing and pretending to be sick during their pre-game walkthrough, apparently making fun of Dirk's flu. Whether it was genuinely targeted at Nowitzki or just teammates joking around is debatable, but the perception was devastating. Here were two superstars, making fun of the opponent who would go on to outplay them on the biggest stage while fighting through genuine illness. It was the kind of moment that defines a narrative. And the narrative was not kind to LeBron. The post-series press conference became instantly infamous. They have the same personal problems they had today. I'm going to continue to live the way I want to live and continue to do the things that I want to do. The comment was interpreted as dismissive, arrogant, and out of touch. It suggested that LeBron believed his critics were jealous of his lifestyle rather than genuinely disappointed in his performance, coming from a player who had just shrunk in the biggest moment of his career. It landed like a bomb. Whatever goodwill LeBron had rebuilt during the regular season was obliterated in that one press conference. What actually happened to LeBron in the 2011 finals? The theories were endless. Some pointed to the mental pressure, the weight of the decision, the hatred he had absorbed from fans and media for an entire year, all converging on the biggest stage. Others pointed to tactical issues. LeBron and Wade had never fully sorted out their offensive hierarchy. And in crunch time, neither player seemed willing to assert himself as the alpha. There were also genuine defensive adjustments by Dallas that disrupted LeBron's game. Rick Carlisle's scheme forced LeBron into mid-range jumpers and contested pull-ups, shots he was less comfortable with than his drives to the basket. Jason Kidd, at 37 years old, used positioning and basketball IQ to cut off LeBron's preferred driving angles. It wasn't that Dallas had some magical defensive formula. It was that they exploited LeBron's passivity, and once he started deferring, the dam broke. The truth was probably some combination of all these factors. LeBron had never faced this kind of scrutiny, this kind of sustained hatred. And when the moment demanded the kind of cold-blooded aggression that champions need, he couldn't find it. Not yet. But here's what matters. LeBron learned. He would use this failure as fuel, as the catalyst for the most important transformation of his career. He worked on his post-game that summer. He developed a more reliable mid-range jumper. He became more assertive, more ruthless, more willing to dominate regardless of the circumstances. The 2012 championship run, one of the greatest individual playoff performances in NBA history, was born directly from the ashes of 2011. LeBron James would eventually win 4 championships, 4 finals MVPs, and cement his place among the greatest players who ever lived. But every one of those triumphs was built on the foundation of this failure. The 2011 finals didn't end LeBron's career. It forged it. But in June of 2011, standing at that press conference podium, LeBron James was experiencing the lowest moment of his basketball life, and the whole world was watching. Chapter 16, Awards, Retirements, and Legacy. The 2010-2011 season produced a remarkable crop of individual award winners, each one reflecting the season's themes of youth, transformation, and dominance. Derrick Rose won the MVP at 22, the youngest recipient in NBA history. The vote wasn't close. Rose received 113 of 121 first-place votes, a landslide that reflected both his brilliance and the narrative surrounding his candidacy. He had taken a 41-win team and turned them into a 62-win juggernaut, the best record in all of basketball. The debate over whether LeBron was more deserving would persist for years. with advanced statistics clearly favoring James. But the MVP has always been about more than numbers. It's about story, about impact, about the player who means the most to his team. By that standard, Rose was a worthy and deserving winner. Tom Thibodeau won Coach of the Year after leading the Bulls to a 21-game improvement from the previous season. It was the largest win improvement in the Eastern Conference. Thibodeau's defensive principles transformed Chicago from an average team into the stingiest defense in the league, allowing just 91.3 points per game. His intensity and attention to detail set a new standard for the franchise. Blake Griffin won Rookie of the Year after averaging 22 points and 12 rebounds with the Los Angeles Clippers. Griffin had technically been drafted in 2009, but missed his entire first season with a knee injury. When he finally took the court, he was a revelation. His combination of explosiveness, power, and above-the-rim finishing made him a nightly highlight reel. The slam dunk contest, which Griffin won with a dunk over the hood of a car, cemented his status as the league's most exciting young player. Griffin brought energy and attention to a Clippers franchise that had been an afterthought in Los Angeles for decades. Lamar Odom won the 6th Man of the Year award for the Lakers, averaging 14 points and 9 rebounds while providing versatility and playmaking off the bench. Dwight Howard won the Defensive Player of the Year for the 3rd consecutive season, joining Dikembe Mutombo and Ben Wallace as the only players to win the award 3 times in a row. Howard's paint protection was the engine that drove Orlando's defense, even as the team fell short in the playoffs. The season also marked the end of 2 legendary careers, bookending an era that had shaped the modern NBA. Shaquille O'Neal, one of the most dominant physical forces any sport has ever seen, announced his retirement on June 1st after 19 seasons. Shaq had won 4 championships with 2 franchises, 3 finals MVP awards with the Lakers, and 1 regular season MVP. He had been a 15-time All-Star, a 3-time scoring champion, and a cultural icon whose personality transcended basketball. Shaq's final season was a quiet one. Playing for the Celtics, he averaged 9 points and 5 rebounds in limited minutes, his body finally surrendering after 2 decades of carrying 235 pounds of muscle up and down the court. His final game came in the conference semifinals against the Heat, a team he had helped win a championship in 2006. There was a poetic symmetry to it. Shaq's last game was against Dwyane Wade, his former championship partner, in the building where they had celebrated together. At his retirement press conference, Shaq was vintage Shaq. He cracked jokes, he got emotional, and he reminded everyone that he had been one of the most entertaining human beings in sports history. His career had taken him from Orlando to Los Angeles, to Miami, to Phoenix, to Cleveland, and finally to Boston. Along the way, he had changed the way teams thought about size, athleticism, and dominance in the paint. The league would never see another player quite like Shaquille O'Neal. Phil Jackson retired from coaching after the Lakers' 4-game sweep at the hands of the Mavericks, ending the most decorated coaching career in NBA history. Jackson finished with 11 championships as a head coach, 6 with the Bulls and 5 with the Lakers. His career playoff record was 229 wins and 104 losses. His career winning percentage was among the highest in league history. He had coached Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Kobe Bryant, and Shaquille O'Neal. His triangle offense had defined 2 dynasties across 3 decades. Jackson was unlike any other coach in professional sports. He gave his players books to read. He burned sage in the locker room. He meditated before games. He earned the nickname the Zen Master because of his calm demeanor and philosophical approach to competition. Critics said he only won because he always had the best players. His defenders argued that managing the egos of Jordan, Pippen, Kobe, and Shaq was itself a coaching achievement that no other coach had proven capable of replicating. However you judged Phil Jackson's legacy, there was no denying the results. 11 championships in 20 seasons, a winning percentage in the finals that no other coach in any sport could match. And it ended with a sweep, the first and only sweep of Jackson's career, at the hands of a team that refused to be intimidated by the Lakers dynasty, even in defeat. The ending was fitting. Jackson went out facing a team that played the kind of smart, unselfish basketball he had always preached, even if the Mavericks ran it through a triangle that looked different from his own. But the legacy of this season, the story that will be told and retold for as long as people care about basketball, belongs to Dirk Nowitzki and the Dallas Mavericks. Dirk silenced every single critic who ever said he couldn't lead a team to a championship. He silenced the people who called him soft. He silenced the people who said Europeans couldn't win the big one. He silenced the people who had written him off after 2006 and 2007. He proved that a 7-foot German with a one-legged fadeaway and an unshakable belief in himself could beat the most talented team in basketball through sheer will, skill, and determination. He played through a torn tendon in his finger. He played through a 101-degree fever. He played through 15-point deficits that would have broken lesser teams. He had the quiet, unwavering support of teammates who believed in him completely. Veterans who had been counted out just like he had, who wanted this championship as much as he did. Dirk's championship run is often cited as one of the greatest in NBA postseason history. Consider the gauntlet Dallas ran. They beat the Portland Trail Blazers in 6 games. They swept the defending champion Los Angeles Lakers, ending Phil Jackson's career. They dispatched the Oklahoma City Thunder, the league's most exciting young team, in 5 games. And they dethroned the Miami Heat, the most talented roster in basketball, in 6 games. In 4 rounds, Dallas beat LaMarcus Aldridge, Brandon Roy, Kobe Bryant, Pau Gasol, Phil Jackson, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, LeBron James, Dwyane Wade, and Chris Bosh. They beat past, present, and future MVPs in consecutive series. They did it with the oldest roster in the playoffs. They did it with a coach, Rick Carlisle, who made perfect adjustments in every single series. And they did it because of one inescapable truth. Talent wins games, but heart wins championships. The 2010-2011 season reshaped the NBA landscape for years to come. LeBron James would use his finals failure as motivation, coming back the following season as a transformed player, more ruthless and determined, and finally winning his first championship in 2012. The Thunder would return to the finals in 2012 as well, announcing themselves as the next great threat. The Grizzlies would become a perennial playoff team built on the grit and grind identity born in that first-round upset. And the Bulls, tragically, would lose Derrick Rose to a torn ACL in the 2012 playoffs, altering the course of what had seemed like a dynasty in the making. But all of that was in the future. In June of 2011, the story was simple and beautiful. A 32-year-old German basketball player walked off the court in tears because 13 years of frustration, doubt, and heartbreak had finally, mercifully, been washed away. His teammates embraced him. His coach embraced him. An entire city embraced him. And the basketball world, even the people who had never cared about the Dallas Mavericks, had to admit they had witnessed something extraordinary. That's the beauty of this game. It doesn't always reward the most talented team. It doesn't always reward the team that looks best on paper. Sometimes it rewards the team that wants it the most. The team that has been knocked down the most times and keeps getting back up. The team that plays for each other instead of for themselves. That's why we watch. That's why we love basketball. And that's why the 2010-2011 season will never, ever be forgotten. Thank you for listening to NBA season recaps. If you enjoyed this journey through basketball history, subscribe and leave a comment, letting us know which season you'd like to hear about next. Until then, rest well, dream of basketball, and remember, the greatest stories are the ones nobody sees coming. Good night.